Hello and welcome to another episode of Michael and Mom Talk Cancer. I am your official host, Michael Kramer, and
I am the other official host. I am Ashlee Kramer. You know me as Michael's mom. And we're so excited because we actually have another Michael here today. There's two of them. Oh my God, I'm surrounded by Michaels. This one we're going to call Mike, but Michael Canney. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, you are.
Awesome. Michael Canney, Ph.D. We have like a million things. I have your whole bio in front of me. You're like the chief scientific officer at, it's Carthera?
Carthera, yeah.
Carthera, okay. Oh my God, I just have to jump into this. Did you do some work in France?
Yeah, I lived in France for a while,
Nice.
for 5 years.
Guess who was born there?
I was born in France, yeah.
Whoa, where?
In Orsay, a little city outside of Paris.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we just want to jump into it. I mean, I can go into your bio. You're doing a phase 3 clinical trial right now with like glioblastoma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but we want to know your story, your background. Jump in.
Yeah.
Tell us about you. Tell us why you're here. This is a different kind of episode for us. We've had a lot of oncology survivors, patients, caregivers, but now we're getting to someone that's treating these people. So I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Where do you guys want to start? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
what got you into this?
Yeah.
Like, how did you get to where you are today? And
we know you're a PhD. We know you're brilliant. What drove you to the brain, to glioblastoma, and the treatments that you're doing now, which are trying to break the blood-brain barrier, basically?
Yeah. Well, you guys said you want a long answer, so I can give you the long
you can give us a long answer.
Obviously, we like to talk.
Yeah.
I've taken a little bit of a circuitous path to get here, but it's always exciting. But it started out when I was an undergrad. I had started doing research as an undergraduate student at Boston University, did some work in mechanical engineering, and there were some great professors who were doing work in acoustics. Specifically, some were doing work, related maybe to sonar and this kind of work, but other teams had more of a focus on medical acoustics. And so it's like, how can you use acoustics to treat people in this case?
So interesting.
And this is a field that's like, it's been around for a very long time. There's these like ancient photos of these guys named the Fry brothers who were doing work with ultrasound devices that were maybe like way ahead of their time, trying to treat even the brain a long time ago. I think it was in the 50s, but I need to check the date. But it was a while back. Never really came to fruition, some of their developments, even though I think they did treat some patients, but it was a little bit ahead of their time before they had kind of all the tools to make it a real treatment. Like, now we have MRI and we have CT and all these imaging methods widely available that allow us to do a lot of things that they couldn't do way back then. But anyways, I'm starting there because I'm saying I got an interest in acoustics. When I went to graduate school, I started working in therapeutic ultrasound. And so this is this whole field of how to use ultrasound for therapy. And this is pretty broad field. It starts, my lab at the time in Seattle, where I did my graduate work, did work in things like breaking up kidney stones. We know about lithotripsy, maybe you've heard of. So they actually use acoustic shock waves to break up kidney stones. And they had a big research program around that. But they also had, some programs around what we call HIFU. So this is high intensity focused ultrasound, which is a new field, which is using, very high power levels of ultrasound to actually heat tissue. And so if you heat it up, you can actually kill tissue. And this can be used, for treating tumors and different things. And it's a growing field. There's a lot of companies out there using HIFU for different applications. But another area, this therapeutic ultrasound realm that's come around was to use it for drug delivery. And so in this case, we'll talk about drug delivery, and this is using ultrasound to disrupt the blood-brain barrier. I didn't come around to this specific field until I went to France for a postdoc, and I went and lived in Lyon, France for quite a while. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Yes.
Fantastic city. And there was actually a lab, again, focused on therapeutic ultrasound where Carthera, this company, kind of got incubated early on. But there's a whole lab of researchers, again, working in this area of therapeutic ultrasound, new applications for treating, diseases and stuff. And there's a founder, the company is a French neurosurgeon named Alexandre Carpentier. He's a neurosurgeon in Paris, and he linked up with this lab and eventually started this company and wanted to bring ultrasound to neurosurgery. And so he was very interested in using ultrasound not only to potentially thermally ablate tissue and kill it with heat, which is what I mentioned, but also eventually to use it for this aspect of drug delivery. And how do we overcome the blood-brain barrier, which has been a field for a long time. It's kind of been a field for maybe 20 years or more, but just recently has come into this clinical translation stage of using it in patients.
Amazing. So you're not in France anymore. Where are you located now?
I'm in Denver now.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's far. That's so is the company is Carthera a French company?
We are, yeah. We're still a French company with I would say a growing American presence. As we expand in the US, we have 5 people now in the US.
Okay. So is this mostly an oncology treatment, or is it's also for like degenerative brain as well, right?
Yeah, so our main focus is on glioblastoma, like you mentioned, for oncology, and it's how can we get drugs, to these brain tumors that normally has been an impediment to drug development for brain tumors for a long time, I think.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to overcome that barrier, get drugs there. But there's other applications, like you say. I mean, we know drugs maybe are not that effective in Alzheimer's disease, and maybe aren't getting there, maybe for Parkinson's, maybe for ALS. So yeah, it has a lot of potential indications.
And right now you're in a clinical trial phase, or are people being treated
people are being treated. I'm urgently watching my email because we have a patient consenting for a trial here that we're trying to sort out. But we're running a phase 3 clinical trial. Like I said, it's quite a large trial, and it's in the US, and then it's in Europe. We're in a bunch of countries in Europe, and the trial is recruiting. We have 40 clinical sites active right now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, about 20 in the US and then 20 in Europe. All at different hospitals and all trying to bring this to patients. But it's a very large trial because we're randomizing patients, and so patients either get our treatment or they get the standard of care. And what we're trying to show is that our treatment is better than the standard of care.
Can I ask you, what is a phase 3 clinical trial? What's the definition of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit open, but if you start, phase 1, for example, phase 1, you're typically looking at dose findings. You're trying to figure out what dose of drug you should give to someone. So you may do an escalation, for example, in the dose of a drug until you have toxicity, and then you back it off, and you might say, okay, this is a safe dose of a drug. In a phase 2 trial, it's also typically a single arm trial, and so every patient, would get the same intervention, and you try to look for a signal. You may do some more dose finding, but in a phase 3 trial, it kind of means like your dose is fixed. You figured out, in our case, we have a dose of ultrasound. We also have a dose of chemotherapy that we're giving. And there's a lot of different designs of phase 3 trials depending on what you're treating, but for our trial in glioblastoma, we're trying to look at whether our treatment prolongs survival in patients is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So the only way to see that is really to randomize patients, and because you need to kind of like eliminate any kind of bias in the trial or intervention bias or placebo effect that might happen.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. What did something bring you? I mean, I know you said that you were fascinated by the acoustic effects, but what is there something that like brought you to specifically like the glioblastomas? I mean, for us, it's such been a personal battle that's brought us to everything we do. Is there something that brought you to where you are now specifically?
Not particularly. Fortunately, I've
Okay,
been fortunate to maybe not have any particular family members, be
right.
affected by glioblastoma. We all definitely. It's an interesting disease because it's fairly rare, and yet it seems everyone you talk to has some personal connection to someone or to someone that they know. Um, but I think for me, it's just working in medicine is the most interesting aspect. I think getting to work with doctors and getting to work on a problem that has been unsolved for so long. The last drug approval for glioblastoma was in 2005.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in
Wow.
20 years, we haven't had a drug approval. There was a device that got approved, in the last decade, but there's been really no therapeutics that have shown any efficacy.
So what do you hope to achieve with all of this? It's a big question, of course.
That's a really big
But-
question, Michael Kramer. He's going to cure people.
Yes.
He's going to pass the
Yes.
blood-brain barrier. I think.
But I want to understand like the thought process behind it. It's such like a hard disease to deal with, and taking that responsibility of trying to make a clinical trial, make drugs for it. It can be. I'm sure it's a lot of pressure.
This is not drugs. This is using ultrasound.
Right.
You're not actually developing drugs, right? You're using known
Yeah.
treatments, but using the ultrasound to pass to pass the blood-brain barrier. That's the idea.
You're doing better than my mom would explain.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. She's still very confused by what I do. I don't know if she can explain it, but yeah. So I mean, we're trying to use existing off-the-shelf drugs
Right.
that maybe have shown some hints of efficacy, but maybe they haven't been effective because they haven't crossed the blood-brain barrier. And so, in our phase 3 trial, we're using a drug called carboplatin, which is quite an old drug. But we think repurposing it, getting across the blood-brain barrier, can make it more effective and really lead to potentially a first approval, first new treatment for these patients. But it doesn't really stop there. I mean, we're investigating all kinds of drugs that could be used with it, and so there's tons of different possibilities as far as if you open this door to getting any drug you want into the brain, all of a sudden you can open up a lot of new opportunities, I think, to test out drugs that have already been tested or new therapeutics that are coming down the pipeline.
We've known some people recently with DIPG that have and both passed away, and we've known more than that, but just like in our recent months. And I know the challenges have been like trying to get into clinical trials, but then even those clinical trials that have been so hard to get into. And
yeah, there is, it's funny you mentioned DIPG. We get this, people discuss it all the time.
I'm sure.
And they're using the same principles of technology for drug delivery in DIPG actually in a clinical trial at Columbia. There's a great researcher there named Elisa Conofagu who's been working in this space a lot and exploring different therapeutics for DIPG, and they have an open trial, I think, running right now for that. Also trying to use ultrasound to disrupt the blood-brain barrier, but they use a little bit of different approach, which is they have an external ultrasound device that they're using instead of an implant that we're using.
That was my next question. So it's an implant, right?
Yeah, it's an implant.
Okay, because when we think of ultrasound, like I think of the millions of ultrasounds that Michael's had throughout his cancer journey, like a million. But this is an implant, so is it implanted into the head?
Yeah, so I have this, again, I should have a real one, but this is a 3D printed version of it that we have, kind of this mock-up. But what you do is when a surgeon goes in to remove the tumor, which they usually do anyways for a glioblastoma, the surgeon will go in and resect the tumor, but we know that when they resect the tumor, there's always some cancer cells that are left, unfortunately. That's what always recurs. That's why the prognosis for these patients is so low. after treatment. But when the surgeon finishes doing the resection, they place a device, just instead of the bone, they just place our device and they fix it to the bone. So
Okay.
it fits in that window that they opened up for surgery. The skin closes over it. You can't see it at all once it's under the skin. And then it has this little port that you plug in, a needle that plugs into a power supply to turn on the device. And so it's kind of designed that way, so it's all MR compatible. These patients need like MRIs regularly to monitor, is the tumors growing? Is it shrinking? Is it still there? And so it's all MR compatible. Then there's no power supply in it.
How often are they getting, or is it different? I mean, right now you're in a clinical trial, even though it's a phase 3, so that means you do have a lot of information. But how often are they getting like the ultrasound, the treatment?
Yeah, so they're getting it once they do the surgery and they get the device implanted. They'll come in and get treatments every 3 weeks.
Okay.
With the drug we're using.
And what have you learned so far? I'm just like, I'm so intrigued by this. What have you learned so far?
Yeah, we've learned so many things. We've published some articles from our phase 2 trials, our earlier stage trials, in the past couple of years. So we've learned a bunch of things. Like we've learned, one is that it seems to be safe to open the blood-brain barrier. It exists for a reason. It kind of protects the brain, and there's a lot of concerns. Are you putting toxic things in? Are you going to have, side effects? We've treated over 100 patients now on our trials, and we haven't seen real evidence that it's toxic or bad for patients to do this repeatedly. Some patients have had 12 or 15 treatments on our trials, and they're doing fine. And so, one, it's safe. Two is, we've seen the blood-brain barrier in humans closes very quickly. So it's like the repair process, once you disrupt it, happens very fast. And we were able to measure it, and we reported it in our recent articles to show that it repairs itself very quickly, which I think is important because it comes back to normal within a couple hours of the treatment.
Wow.
Yeah.
A couple hours. Okay, when you were saying the 3 weeks between, I was like, does it take that long to repair? Wow, a couple hours. That's insane.
Yeah, much faster than we expected. I think we thought, 6 hours, 24 hours, but it turns out it seems like it's much faster than that. And so, because of that, we learned a bunch of things in our phase 2 trials. We learned we should give the chemo at an optimal time point just before the treatment, so that we can really maximize the effects of the chemo, get as much of the drug into the brain as we can. So that's something we learned in our trials. And then, we saw some early, signs of a therapeutic effect that were obviously led us to start a phase 3 trial that you see some patients respond. Not every patient is going to respond, I think, but we definitely saw some responses which are very rare in recurrent glioblastoma. So
you're recruiting people now. Is that, yeah?
Yep.
All right. We'll put a link. I'm going to get information from you so that we can also give people more information if there are people out there that are interested in, like, we know how it's hard to get into clinical trials, but like where the locations are. You said there's 20 locations in the US, right?
They are, yeah. They're scattered all over the country. Yeah, we have like the Mayo clinics are all participating in the trial.
Okay.
Northwestern, UCSF. We have sites in New York, Columbia, a bunch in Florida. So
that's where we are.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, you're in Florida. Okay, we're in Florida. Are you?
We're in Miami.
We're Sylvester people, so
that's great. Yeah, Miami is one of our sites at Miami Baptist. Is actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Michael did radiation there, so we know we know Baptist.
Yeah,
and I would imagine that in order to do this work, you must be so passionate about it. Like, what effects does this have on you? That's a hard question.
It's a good question though, because I wanted to ask the same thing, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
We're related.
Yeah, it's the first thing I think about. It's like you're dealing with all these patients, and it's a pretty grim diagnosis, and it's tough.
But like what you're doing is changing the world. That's your goal. But anyway, we'll let you talk.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I mean,
It is.
it is. I mean, I've gotten to see a lot of the patients. I think is really powerful to see the patients you're treating, because it's kind of all theoretical when you're staring at a screen and working on things. But our first patients in the U.S. were at Northwestern, and I flew out there almost every week. It's actually an amazing story, because the first patient, I was actually in France at the time, and it was during COVID. In 2020 was our first patient, I think, and it was right in March or April or something. It was like
Oh
right
my
at
God.
this time when everything was kind of wild. I mean, uncertain, I guess we should say. But I was in France at the time at our offices, and we finally recruited the first patient on trial, and I got on an airplane from Paris to fly back to Chicago for the first surgery. It's kind of nice because the plane was empty, but
That's
it was
but kind of crazy to fly at that
interesting
time.
time. But actually, all during COVID, this COVID period, we still recruited patients in Chicago at Northwestern. They kept
Right.
they were fortunate enough to keep the clinical trials ongoing and recruiting, which wasn't necessarily the case, I think, for all hospitals. But they have an amazing team there, and so I was going every month, every week, basically, to see different patient treatments. I don't know, got to know a bunch of them a little bit, as much as I can. I mean, where I was kind of an observer. I'm not there as their doctor, so if when you get a treatment, you just kind of um, see how much they want to interact and everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely powerful, and I've tried to get everyone at the company to go and see some patients get treated, go to surgery, and experience this.
I think that's really important. We have realized that Michael's on a clinical trial now, and
Mm-hmm.
we have realized the importance of like working a little bit with a pharmaceutical company, how important it is for them to hear patient stories.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine for you being on site and speaking to the patients directly, I think it's got to change something. It must change something in you and your approach, because we are dealing with not just our computers, we're dealing with the whole human.
It's so important. I mean, we have to remind people of that
Yeah,
constantly.
yeah,
People who are in the regulatory world or who are in I would say, clinical affairs world, and there's very rigid approaches to running clinical trials, and it's very important, obviously, but some people lose sight of that, and so it's such an important aspect of it, I think.
yeah. The whole patient and the human side of it is really important.
What's been the biggest challenge so far, you would say?
Other than starting in COVID, oh my God, that's when
Yeah,
Michael was diagnosed, actually.
yeah.
So we
Yeah,
can relate to the difficulties
I
of
mean, it was
COVID.
a tough, yeah. I mean, there's hospitals that wouldn't even let us on site at the time. I mean, MD Anderson was almost closed to having people on site. We trained doctors in a hotel room for our trial, and we couldn't even come on site and do anything. So it was a weird time, and it's strange because people keep getting cancer. It was like, we should keep running trials, and hospitals, I don't know, didn't necessarily prioritize it. So, um,
Was that your answer? As COVID was the biggest challenge? There's got to be a
oh, the
since
biggest challenge. I mean,
COVID.
I think the biggest challenge for me is is to see patients who don't respond. It's not every patient necessarily responds to a new intervention, um, and you want to help them too. And that's hard. I mean, so I mean,
Yeah,
we can see all of the kind of the building blocks coming together. I think in the next, I don't know, 10 years, hopefully, to help these patients. But and I'm hoping that we get there faster. But this is definitely a challenge.
yeah. I would think that would be a challenge, because you still want to be motivated to continue because you're helping other people. But you know how we always, when something doesn't work for one person, I'm sure
Yeah,
it must be
and I think
hard.
I'm sure it's challenging for patients who have put a lot of hope on clinical trials as well. I mean,
Yeah.
for a disease like this, I think the best thing you can do for yourself or future patients is to get on a clinical trial, even if
Message. Say that again.
Yeah, that's
Say
true.
that again.
yeah. And I think, but the patients who are realistic about it come on trial and they say, hey, maybe this treatment hopefully will help me. that's what we all want. We want to show a big effect in patients, but hopefully it will also help the patients in the future from this trial. So those are the two things I think to think about.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
We talked about that recently with the trial that Michael's doing, is that it's not just that it will help him, we hope it will help future patients as well.
100%.
That's like one of the biggest goals. Oh my God, there's like so many other things I wanted to ask you. So yeah, how long is this? Like how long, when did this trial start and how long are you, I don't want to say is there like an end date, because I guess the whole goal is that you continue with the clinical trial and then you get approval. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, exactly. The goal was obviously to get approval. We started the trial, let me see, I think it was last year. And we're hoping to, finish our recruitment into the trial sometime next year.
But people have started, even though you're continuously recruiting, people are in the trial. Like, okay, right.
Yeah, so we just put out, an announcement, like we've recruited over 100 patients into the trial so far. We need just over 500 patients to come into the trial so that we can really see if the survival benefit is there for the experimental arm patients. So that's our goal. Once we get all 40 centers now are kind of up and recruiting. So we're hoping by, next year, like I said, we'll finish recruitment and then just see if there is a signal there and an impact on overall survival.
We're rooting for you. That's all. I mean, we're definitely rooting for you. You know what? Is this going to sound like I don't know, maybe too practical of a question, but what about people that don't live near a clinical trial? Are there any provisions like transportation and housing? Like, how does that work? Because 20 centers, but the US is pretty darn big.
Yeah, I know there is some provisions for travel stipends for patients if needed who come on trial. We do have some patients, traveling from afar, I would say, to some of our sites, especially out west. We have a site open in Salt Lake, and I know the patient came from another state to participate. So that's pretty common.
Yeah.
I think the good thing about the kind of logistics of our trial is once they have surgery, they have to come every 3 weeks or so
Right.
for a day or two at the hospital. So if they are traveling, they could fly, every 3 weeks or so and come for the treatment.
Okay. And how, when you're in the trial, I don't know, like, I know Michael's trial, for example, right now it's a 6-month trial. Is there a length of time or is it indefinite?
It's about 6 months.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's great. It's so cool. Like, I've never met anyone who is doing this type of work, and it's so great to talk to someone like you, because we've seen 2 people recently in our lives pass away from DIPG, and we watched them when they were first diagnosed. So to know that someone's out there, like literally right now, you working on a clinical trial, it's so amazing to see, because it's such a daunting task to take on, and for you to take that on, it's encouraging that people are willing to work on this disease that seems like it's almost unbeatable, with the odds. And for you to take that on and know how hard it's going to be and how many years it's probably going to take, it takes a lot of courage. So
And
we're so grateful for
resilience
that.
on your part,
Yeah.
and like sticking to it, even though you have to have setbacks. I'm sure of that. But like when you said earlier, 20 years without a new treatment.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about.
But this is so innovative as well. I don't know, for me, hearing about ultrasound, that sounds so innovative and so outside of what we would think. I don't know. But I'm not a doctor, but still it's.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I come from like kind of the pure research field where it's like I go to conferences with scientists and engineers and they've been debating this technology, this kind of technology with ultrasound for since the early 2000s. And everyone's excited about it at these scientific conferences, but now the confronting that with the medical realities and bringing it to patients is like what's really different in the past few years as we're finally at this stage where we're saying, can we actually bring this to patients? And that's like a whole different thing for at least scientists to think about. I don't know if that's clear, but it's a little bit of a, yeah.
And the other challenge with clinical trials is I think a lot of times people think that if you're in a clinical trial, it's because you're out of solutions, or think it's because you're like, have nowhere to turn. But clinical trials often are just like full of hope, and have been. Like phase 3 means you've been through 2 phases.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the other thing that I think there's a misconception. People get really scared to go in a clinical trial. We hear that a lot. Like
Really?
when people hear trial, they're like, I don't want to be the guinea pig. I don't want to be the mouse. But when you're in a phase 3, you've already been through a lot.
Yeah, I think I think our patients are a little bit different. I don't, not necessarily the doctors seeing them every day, but most of our patients are just upset if they get randomized to the control arm because they want something different.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
That's where it's unfortunate, but this is the only way we can really show, that the treatment has a clear effect.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise there's, there have been a lot of treatments where people have run single arm trials and seen an effect and then say, hey, it works, but does it work? There's no legitimacy, behind that.
Right.
And so we need trials like this to really, show that these new treatments are effective. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, how has this changed you as a person? Like you, does it make you like more appreciative, like for your family, for your health, for your life? Because I feel like when I went through cancer, it made me that way, and I'm just wondering how it impacts you, because you're seeing all these people all the time, and it's your job to
And you're
work
trying to save their lives and change medicine, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a big question. Just fortunate to be healthy, I guess. I don't know what the
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you didn't seek this out. It kind of came to you through your passion, but do you feel like it's your purpose?
Yeah. I think, to be fortunate enough to have a job where you wake up every day and this is what you're thinking about, for sure. I mean, there's purpose in a lot of jobs, though. I can't necessarily put people down who do other things either. I mean, there's
having your purpose doesn't put anybody else's purpose down.
No,
definitely
exactly.
not.
I can think about a lot of jobs. There's purpose in hospitality.
There is.
In so many professions that provide value for people. So I'm not going to say that it's better than anything else, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely impactful. It's meaningful. I mean, I started out as a mechanical engineer, and I think, I was like, do I want to go and, I don't know, build bridges or something? It's like that helps society too. That's an interesting job.
Yeah.
But medicine obviously is somewhat feels more impactful, I think, as you're saying. Especially these big intractable problems in medicine that we're still confronted with. I mean, there's been so much movement in cancer treatments, I think, for so many cancers where it's almost become a chronic disease for a lot of cancers, depending on what you're diagnosed with, and that there's still these pockets of cancer that there hasn't been any development, I don't know, glioblastoma or pancreatic cancer or,
another one.
Other things that, we still haven't really moved the needle on, despite all these things that we know about cancer. And so I'm like kind of optimistic that everything is converging so that we're going to get there, hopefully in the next decade or so, but maybe not.
Optimistic. We see we do see progress, even in the really hard cancers that we've seen progress, but the blood-brain barrier has been one that, I feel like that's been such a huge issue, but how do you cope? Like, how do you cope, you as a human? You, Mike. Not the guy with the Ph.D, but you, Mike. Like, what do you do to cope? Because you are this has got to be
emotionally, it's tough.
I mean, you live in Colorado, so you got some nice nature around you,
Yeah,
I
we have a
think.
lot of ways to cope in Colorado. I mean, yeah,
You
Yeah.
snowboard over there?
yeah, we'd go skiing, we go hiking.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, we're very,
Okay.
very active, very outdoors. I just ran the Boulder, the 10K yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
One of the biggest 10K races I think in the country. It's fantastic.
You
Uh,
have rosy cheeks, so there you go. That's what it's from.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's my second year doing it, so.
Cool.
Oh,
That's
that's
great.
okay. That's good. Okay, so now we're getting down to Mike and how you cope. Um, if there's something you could change in healthcare, what would it be?
Ooh, there's so many things to
It's
change
so
in health.
many things I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's a massive question to me to answer. I,
You
I
can,
would I'll give a few stories. I think I got exposed a little bit. There's a very negative sentiment about socialized medicine. I'm not necessarily advocating for it or that it's a better system, but when I was living in France, I went and saw a doctor even before I had healthcare coverage, and I paid him $25 for a doctor visit,
yeah,
and I got
Yeah.
an appointment in a day. And in the U.S., I've struggled to see a primary care doctor within a month. Um,
yeah,
and yet we pan some of these other systems and say that they're way, not as good as ours. Um, I think there's very little transparency in healthcare, and there's very little rationale for a lot of different things. And we even see this around costs. I mean, an MRI in France, again, I have this comparator, but it was maybe 1/5 the cost of an MRI in the US. It's the same scanner, like
yeah.
literally the same model number, the same scanner. Maybe that differential is different now. I don't know. This is years ago when I was doing research, because we used to pay for MRI time to go and do things, so we had some idea. Um, these are just a few things, small things, but transparency. I mean, I think the ability to transfer medical records. I helped my dad with some healthcare things, and even they printed out a stack of medical records to take from the hospital to another hospital. And I was like, wow, this is what we're doing these days. Uh, you know, if I wanted to have his MRI looked at by someone else, and the quickest way was to mail a CD. We can't
Can
have
I
it
tell
digital.
you? We
Uh,
had the same thing with
Yeah.
Michael.
A long
He had
yeah,
time.
an MRI at Nicholas Children's Hospital,
Print it.
had to print it, had to get this CD and take it over to Sylvester.
It's
So
crazy.
that was
It's
like
crazy.
just 3 years ago, not
right.
that
Yeah,
long
yeah.
ago.
So I mean,
Yeah,
we do have an amazing healthcare system,
we
but
do.
it's like, why these things are crazy
Just
to
so
me.
inefficient sometimes.
Um, and then
Inefficient in the
I think
cost.
the other thing maybe is a little controversial, but I think HIPAA is amazing that we all have this patient protection around all of our data. This should exist for sure, no doubt. But sometimes I think like, okay, maybe if patients gave more of their health data, we could find a cure faster.
Right.
And the only way to do that right now is really within the context of a clinical trial. You have to enroll in a trial and allow people to use some of that data. Um, I don't know. That's a little bit of a, I think about glioblastoma. If every patient with glioblastoma gave their healthcare data to a database, and that was all accessible all the time for every GBM patient, would we need to even have a control arm for our trial? Maybe we still wouldn't, but um, it would, even just having that data available would make, you know, I think health research different. And I think a lot of patients would be open to that. There are registries and there are things. I know that there's people working on this. I'm not totally aware of everyone, but some of these things could help to move the needle, I think.
Yeah, I've actually
That's
thought
a
about
good
that.
point.
I've thought about that
I
before.
don't know.
Like if there
What do
could
you
be a
think as a
wave.
patient? Maybe, I guess, if you're, I mean, I don't know. What's your perspective talking with everyone about this?
Yeah, I mean, I would. But what exactly do you mean when you say that? Like the prior health issues to diagnosis? Is that what you're asking?
Or
Or like,
how the treatment affects the patient. I understand what you're saying
Yeah.
because right now with HIPAA, everything is completely private. If there was a way to do it. waiver, and I would allow my information to be
So
given,
that's what you mean.
which is what you
Okay.
sign when
Yeah.
you're doing a clinical trial. Like there were so many things to
Yeah.
so many documents.
I would share it. I would share anything if it helped, honestly. To me, it's not a big deal. Honestly, it's fine.
Yeah.
But not everyone feels that way, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be up to patients ultimately, but I think, I don't know, maybe that would help, maybe that wouldn't help, but these are some things, I think, and just transparency and pricing and cost and
Pricing.
everything is unbelievable. I can't imagine. I mean, yeah, again, haven't seen friends and family navigate the healthcare system who have used it a lot, and then all of a sudden you get a big bill and we still don't even, I don't know.
Don't understand it. I can tell you after 5 years of like getting very, very high medications and bills, and
Yeah.
you just think,
Yeah, and I mean,
like he's getting up to like 100 million. I don't know, but the amount of treatments in 5 years and
we kind of
admissions.
see it too from the company perspective. I guess I can just comment a little generally about it. Is, when you run a clinical trial, you pay for costs at each hospital
Right.
that the company is covering for each patient that comes on trial, and the highest costs don't necessarily come from the centers that you would expect to be the best centers. I guess if we're going to pay for quality and say this center is the top center in the country, we might
Right.
expect them to cost more because the doctors are better and all this stuff. There's actually very little correlation we've seen across,
Right.
So I don't know how they get these numbers, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of us, I can tell you that. And also, we lived in France, so I know the price of things in France. It was not the same. Definitely not.
Yeah, that's crazy. My other story from France, and I won't mention the hospital, but there's a hospital in France I've been to, and it was, the hospital you'd walk into, and it was very, paint is coming off the walls, and, looks very like not great. I guess I would say not very aesthetic compared to some of the hospitals you walk into in the U.S. that are, brand new and they look very nice. And I walked in this hospital and I was like, wow, this is going to be a mess. And then, we went down though to the OR, and this is the visual building you walk into, but then you walk into the OR where the patient gets surgery. All the equipment was brand new. The
Right.
OR was stunning. They had all the same equipment as a U.S., OR. So I don't know. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, those French. They just needed to put a few paintings up on the wall and it would have been okay.
Exactly.
No, the French don't like to have airs, those kinds of airs. Jen, ask a couple of just fun questions.
Yeah, we'll finish
We're
off.
just going to finish with a couple of fun questions about you.
Yeah, so I just want to ask you, who is the one person in the world that's had the most impact on you?
Oh, it's definitely my high school cross country coach.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I think that would be all of our answers. We had a high school cross country coach who was also our English teacher who was somewhat famous at our high school, I guess, for being showing tough love, I guess, for all of us. But this was Jim Carney. Yeah.
Oh,
amazing individual.
I love that. Okay, one more fun one. Is there a superpower you wish you had?
I mean, the ability to cure this disease.
Yeah.
I'll just go with that. Yeah.
We'll take that. Do you want to ask the final one?
Yeah. So if you knew you're going to die tomorrow, what would you do today?
We ask this to everyone.
That's an impossible question. I mean, probably would just spend time with the people around me that I enjoy spending time with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most consistent answer that we have received, is being with the people you love. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We'll definitely put links so people can find out more about the trial.
Yeah, we do have a website dedicated to the trial. The trial, our acronym is Sono Bird, which was very challenging part about how do you name a trial something, but SonoBird is what came out. So sonobird.eu is the phase 3 clinical trial.
Okay.
Carthera.eu is our company website. More info.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
for
thank
your
you so
time.
much. It's an official goodbye from your host, Michael Kramer, and
the other host, Ashlee Kramer. And thank you so much, Mike, for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that's listening, and we will be back soon.
Yes.
Mwah.